Through most of your time in elementary and middle school, you've heard of similes and metaphors and stuff like that. But did you know that there are more forms of figurative language to learn? Let's look at some of them. The first is synecdoche, which is when you reference a part to a whole. An example comes from old sailing terminology when they say, all hands on deck. Hands is a part that references the whole of the entire body. So instead of taking your hands and throwing them on the deck, like that's possible, the crew would rather just get on deck themselves. Like synecdoche, metonymy takes part of something and puts it with something else, but usually they use an attribute to describe a concept or a place. Like when they say, we'll take this discussion to City Hall. What they really mean is that they're going to take it to the legislative body. Another fun example that might make it a little bit easier for you is to use Beyonce. When they say, if you like it, then you should have put a ring on it. They use the ring as a symbol to commemorate the institution of marriage. The next is zeugma, which is where one word applies in two different senses. I found two great examples in songs, the first being Hey Mickey and the other being Our Song by Taylor Swift. In Hey Mickey, she sings, he took me by the heart when he took me by the hand. Now literally, when you grab someone's hand, you can't grab their heart. What that means is she's become very infatuated with him because he's sweet to her. Another example is he's got a one-hand feel on the steering wheel, the other on my heart. I don't need to explain this one, do I? Hearts and steering wheels aren't connected unless you draw them like I did. The next is anaphora, which is the deliberate repetition of the beginning of a sentence. Thomas Jefferson used this a lot in the Declaration of Independence. But I like more fun examples, like this one from Breaking Bad. Walter White says, I am not in danger, Skylar. I am the danger. A guy opens his door and gets shot, and you think that of me? No, I am the one who knocks. As you can tell, the anaphora comes from referencing the words I am 3 times, which is why they're nice and pretty in red. The next is euphemism, which is a polite way of saying something rude or unpleasant. An example comes in the phrase, he kicked the bucket, which means he died. Now, not all of them are about death. Here's one you'll never hear Donald Trump use. Instead of saying you're fired, he could just say, I'm letting you go, and be using a euphemism. Now, anastrophe is a lot of fun, and you can remember it as the word order catastrophe. An example comes from Yoda in Star Wars. I know, it's an obvious one, but it works. He says, strong in the force you are. The reason this is an anastrophe is because instead of putting the subject and verb first, he puts the verbal phrase first, which is not what we usually do in our language. The next is irony. This is hard to describe, ironic, right? But we've all heard it. It's saying one thing but meaning another, or being put in a situation that directly contradicts what you know. Like when a traffic cop gets his license suspended for an unpaid traffic ticket. Like a traffic cop would ever do that, right? Or a better example is when you get your windshield broken by a rock that flew and hit the windshield from a window fixing truck. Imagine Safelite breaking your windshield. The next is an oxymoron, which is a phrase putting contradictory phrases together. Things like virtual reality, the living dead, alone together, pretty ugly, and jumbo shrimp directly contradict each other. Because if it's virtual, it's not a reality. If it's alive, it can't be dead. If they're alone, they can't do it together. If they're pretty, then they can't be ugly. And if it's jumbo, it's not shrimpy. Another example is in Andy Warhol's quote, I am not a deeply superficial person. Superficial means it's right at the surface. Deeply means it's not at the surface, so they're contradicting each other. Onomatopoeias were sound words like boom, chirp, clatter, buzz, and pow. They were words that directly sound like the things they are trying to describe. Look at comic books and just notice this. The next is hypophora. What is hypophora? Hypophora is when you ask a question and then answer it, like this slide. Apostrophes are when you speak to an inanimate object. In Romeo and Juliet, Juliet does her "Oh happy dagger" soliloquy. Or you can sing "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star" and talk to a non-living star. And finally, there's satire, which is the use of humor to criticize people's stupidity or vices. Anytime you see Saturday Night Live, any of the scary movies, any spoof of anything really, they're using satire. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen.